Hello! Welcome to Film Fanatics, three film geeks discussing movies new and old. My name's Dan.
My name is Justin.
And I'm Joe.
This week, Bad Teacher co-stars Cameron Diaz and Jason Segel team up again, this time to make a sex tape. The annual Purge is Anarchy. The most revered film critic of all time gets his own film in Life Itself. And in our home media moment, it's Cameron Diaz again as a con woman in Gambit. As we will review two of her films this week, in our top five, we'll reveal our favorite Cameron Diaz movies. Our triple feature of older films is new classic The Dark Knight Rises, listener's choice old classic The Secret of Kells, and Oscar-nominated film American Graffiti. Our first film up is Sex Tape, and before we get to the reviews, this was a pretty big bomb this week at the box office, not even opening in the top three. And Justin found a quote from the chairman of Sony Pictures, I believe it was, sort of hypothesizing why that might be. So I thought we'd talk about that a little bit before we actually get to the reviews. Justin, what was that quote?
All right, this is from Sony Distribution Chief Rory Brewer. "We made a sweet, funny, romantic comedy with stars that we love, but the title is a little confusing to some folks. There's definitely a sweetness to it, and we hope we end up being around for a long while. We also have a strong opportunity overseas."
So trying to save face there a little bit, obviously trying to speak to maybe the stockholders of Sony, saying, look, this was supposed to be a big hit movie this summer. It didn't do very well. Here's maybe why. I don't buy into any of this. Joe, what do you think of this quote?
It sounds like his solution is just to kind of attack his supposed fan base by saying, you should have liked this, why didn't you?
Yeah,
like
why didn't you go?
Like it's your problem. Well, I mean, to be fair, it's like we said, it's kind of been a low summer anyway, and maybe it just didn't draw that much attention. I mean, to be fair, we already had one Cameron Diaz comedy earlier, so maybe people didn't feel like they would need another one so soon.
Well, and in general, this seems like the summer of R-rated comedies. We already had Neighbors and Jump Street, which were big hits, and then Million Ways to Die in the West, obviously not so much. Tammy, a moderate hit.
Well, I mean, a lot of those movies who actually did have some degree of better marketing, I think, before them and a lot of build-up. We saw, some previews for some of those films like months and months beforehand. Sex Tape was relatively new, and I think you could tell it just didn't have as much of an advertising team behind it to push it.
I would agree with that. They did run the previews in a lot of the recent comedies, but yeah, the first time I even saw it was in The Other Woman, and that was just a few months ago. Justin, what do you think?
Well, I agree with you, gentlemen, on the fact that he's kind of attacking his own fan base here. It's well put, Joe. I'd like to offer a brief counterpoint. When we look at a lot of the movies over the years that have been really, really successful R-rated comedies, they've been relatively less in your face about what the matter is going to be. For example, the one I offered up, Dan, prior to the show starting, was Superbad. Superbad is basically all revolving around sex. However, you would never be able to gather that from the film's title. And yet, because of that, was still able to make a pretty healthy chunk of money. And we also had Sex Drive, which also revolves around the same theme, and didn't do that well either.
Sex Drive didn't really have any big stars in it. I mean, Seth Green had
that was the
a
bulk
cameo,
of it,
but I mean, nobody's going to see Sex Drive, for that. But, I mean, my counter to that was, of course, Sex and the City, which did have a big fan base beforehand. But you also have movies like The Hangover, which that title's pretty much on the nose with, what happens in that movie. A lot of debauchery and drinking. And his comment that the title misrepresented the movie, I think is a bit ridiculous. The movie is about a sex tape.
I mean, it certainly wasn't lying about anything.
No. And really, in a year that we've had a lot of marketing issues, the trailer did tell us exactly what the movie was going to be.
Yeah, I mean, didn't leave too much to the imagination, but I mean, at least it wasn't lying to us, which some movies...
far more can be said for a lot of marketing this year.
Yeah, it's kind of been my issue with a lot of movies, has been a big part of it and due to the marketing. So at least this one, wasn't lying to us.
Yeah. So, for whatever reason, people didn't really take to it, but let's find out what we thought of Sex Tape. This is from director Jake Kasdan of Bad Teacher, among many others. Teams up with Diaz and Jason Segel again for this raunchy R-rated comedy. They play married couple Annie and Jay, whose sex life post-children has come to a halt. In wondering how they can get their groove back, Annie suggests they record themselves doing every position from the book The Joy of Sex. The next morning, with second thoughts, Annie asks Jay to erase the video. Instead of him doing that, it gets uploaded to the cloud and synced with several iPads that Jay has given away as gifts to friends and family and Annie's new boss. Bad Teacher is one of my favorite comedies of the last few years, and many of Kazan's other projects like Orange County, Walk Hard, and TV shows Freaks and Geeks and New Girl are perennial favorites. So how Sex Tape turned out so badly is a complete mystery. I side with everyone that decided not to see this movie this weekend. I really didn't like it. Diaz and Siegel give it their all, going completely naked for several scenes and really trying their best with a subpar script, co-written by Siegel himself with partner Nicholas Stoller, the same team that brought us the Muppets reboot, another head-scratcher that this script is so weak. Supporting players Rob Corddry and Ellie Kemper are fine as the couple's best friends, but Rob Lowe is completely wasted and unfunny as Annie's boss. The film's jokes fall mostly flat, and the ones that work we saw in the trailer. It just wants to be so naughty and uncomfortable, and it veers towards that, but somewhere along the line, they forgot to add the laughs. Like a lot of bad sex, Tape goes on too long and leaves you unsatisfied. I give it a D.
Wow.
Joe, what'd you think of Sex Tape?
Maybe it's because of the whole lack of seeing Bad Teacher that I didn't feel quite as strongly about it as I guess you did in your dislike, but I can understand it. I do agree with you. I think Diaz and Siegel are really having fun.
Yeah, they have good chemistry together.
They definitely have good chemistry, and they do give it their all for the roles, and I think that's one of the redeeming qualities of the movie. There are some decent jokes, but as you pointed out, most of the best ones were in the trailer. I agree with you. This one does run on a bit too long. I think a lot of the jokes in the movie run in too long, so that's kind of one reason they lack a lot of punch. And I feel like the third act just really lost itself. I mean, like, they just had these huge leaps in logic. Like, you just realize these people must not know how the internet works. Like,
right.
Let's go into this one random developer of the porn industry, this one website, break a couple of their computers, and that's going to erase it.
Yeah.
Okay, that's one plot hole. Plus, they brought their kids along, too. I don't know what the
heck
they
was
were
terrible.
thinking they want to hide this from them, so that was a huge contradiction.
Also, in that scene, a completely wasted cameo.
Completely.
I
mean, he was the best part of the movie.
I would probably say so.
But you're right. He was kind of wasted.
Yeah.
And, I mean, there's also the whole... They basically are screwed over, so to speak, because of this kid that finds the tape and decides, I'm going to just upload it to this website, if you don't give me $25,000. First of all, the fact that this happens comes out of nowhere. This kid might be an evil genius, but you shouldn't really be that afraid of him. Secondly, if they decide to get the tape back from him, there's nothing to stop him from uploading it to...
He still has it on his computer, I'm sure.
Like, okay, let's prevent him from uploading it to this particular site. You could upload it to any one of the free amateur porn sites in the internet.
Yes.
Now, they got out of this plot hole by having him have this random change of character, which was not established at all in the whole movie.
No, I know.
So, if it wasn't for, like, those issues that were so glaring to me, I would have felt it was okay. But there were just things about this movie that were so stupid. The only thing that really saved it for me was the chemistry, but I only give it a little bit higher than you, and that's a D+.
Well, to be honest, I really was teetering on that D+, because I did laugh a little bit. And like we both talked about, Diaz and Siegel were great together, really giving it their all. But we've had a few comedies recently on the show that I've given D+ to. Think Like a Man 2 and Tammy. I believe you gave both of those C-. And to be honest, this is just not in the same area as those. So I didn't feel that it deserved the same grade.
I mean, I was teetering on a C- too, to be perfectly honest, but I don't know. Like, upon retrospect, it was already forgettable for me.
Right.
I don't know. I guess there were some things. I guess maybe there was some star power for Tammy that held up for me.
Yeah, honestly, probably by the end of the year, because I did see about 15 more minutes of Tammy when I was on my break, and it's
a little funny.
Probably the best scene in the movie with Kathy Bates.
Yeah.
Trying to sort of, wake Tammy up from her life.
Like, I don't think that...
And I thought, all right, this might deserve a C-. I
don't know. I feel that, honestly, this movie didn't have too many of those really good scenes to hold it up.
No, it didn't. And not only are you right with the jokes going on too long, but they're also few and far between just in general.
Yeah.
Like, even if they didn't go too long, this...
There really aren't that many jokes.
Yeah, it really, lingers in so many different scenes.
I don't want to hold Justin off here, but I'm curious. Maybe you could even add some input to this, Justin, after your review. But how did you guys feel about the whole debacle in the house with her meeting her boss and that whole random leap of
I hated
logic.
it.
Like with
I hated it. That's why I said
drug
Rob
thing.
Lowe was completely wasted. I love Rob Lowe. He's hilarious.
Yeah.
This character here was just...
I didn't get it.
I didn't get it.
was
I
creepy.
didn't like it. A lot of forced things.
Very
in this
forced
movie, I
humor.
feel like.
Yeah. For lack of a
Justin,
better
let's
word.
hear from you about Sex Tape.
I feel like with smart and stupid comedy, there's a certain balance you need to achieve, and this just has no idea. The problem largely comes from Jake Kasdan forcing his audiences to suspend disbelief at every turn, even with literally the opening sequence of the movie. Fortunately, like you both mentioned, the chemistry here is strong, and I really did love Rob Corddry and Ellie Kemper.
I thought they were good.
Even though there's literally one scene where I think they were entirely relying on improvisational humor, and they mostly pull it off.
I'd argue most of those scenes, actually, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
Well, they probably recognized it was a terrible script.
might as well go off the cuff, right?
Right.
Unlike you, Dan, I did actually like the surprise cameo at the end, who we won't give away.
Oh, I liked it. I just didn't... He just seemed wasted, that's all.
No, it was a good cameo. It's just,
Yeah.
I agree,
Yeah.
it just should have been used more, better.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, I would probably give this a lower grade alongside you gentlemen, but I feel like with a movie like this, because it's only a little over 90 minutes, it keeps moving steadily. I think with the exception of one really, really drawn-on joke, it didn't detract too much for me, and I just thought it was mostly forgettable. Much like this year, it just was a blah to me, and I give it a C-.
It's not too far off.
No, but what bothers me about that is you gave Bad Teacher a C+, and this is so much worse than Bad Teacher. I know, Joe, you can't really chime in on that because you've never seen it, but
You told me I should.
that
Hey,
blows my mind a little bit.
the
that's
fact that
all.
at least he gave it a significantly higher grade.
I was gonna
Yeah,
say.
C+ to C- isn't that much of a leap, I don't think. I don't know. So you thought this was a little bit better than Tammy, actually.
A smidge, like
Okay.
a hair, if that. I mean, it's not, for starters, it's nowhere near as uncomfortable as it was watching Tammy. I felt like the character development was almost equally as flat, if not unnoticeable whatsoever. But
Well,
I felt like I laughed considerably more watching this than I did watching Tammy at all. I mean, yes,
Well, you don't really like Melissa McCarthy either.
I don't,
I
but I
think
do
it's-
like
it's a
Kathy
fair
Bates, who
statement.
does have a couple funny bits with Melissa McCarthy.
I'll be honest with you. I think the characters in Tammy, admittedly, might not have had the best development, but there was some development, and they didn't make huge, massive, stupid leaps. I mean, if they did make stupid decisions, it was part of their character. Whereas,
And there were consequences.
and there were consequences. Whereas some of the things that happened in this movie just made no sense, and that really bugged me. Like, these people were completely unrealistic. Like, I mean, completely.
You don't think there was ridiculous moments in Tammy?
There were, but that kind of fit with the ridiculous nature of the character. She was this ridiculous, outrageous person that did all these crazy things, whereas these people are normal people that do this one thing and try to get their lives back to normal, and
Yeah.
they just keep doing more ridiculous things.
And not only are the characters ridiculous in Sex Tape, but the situations,
they end up in.
as you
Oh.
sort of said in your review, are just, they're huge plot holes that don't make any sense in the real world.
There's also another point I'd like to address on why I chose to give this a little bit higher grade than Tammy. Tammy is basically a comedy drama, but mostly drama focused near the end, and it largely doesn't work. Sex Tape is at least understands it's a stupid comedy, but trying to be a little lighthearted here and there.
But it's not funny, is my problem with it.
I laughed, but with the exception of a few times, I laughed at pretty much everything I saw in the trailer, which I
Same,
don't think is a
more or less.
good thing, honestly.
I mean, the bottom line is neither of them is a good film.
No.
We all three have given them both negative grades. I think that Tammy makes a little more sense than this. You know,
If I had to pick,
I don't know.
I would probably watch Tammy over this.
I would as well.
It's not like a huge leap, but I don't know. I found some of the antics to be a little more interesting.
Yeah. All right, well, let's move on here. Up next is The Purge, Anarchy. And Joe's going to tell us about that.
It's a horror thriller directed by James DeMonico and starring Frank Grillo. It's the Italian show. Set in a dystopian America of 2023, it continues sometime after the last film. The U.S. government has eliminated crime by limiting all criminal activities, including murder, and making them legal for one night. This is a holiday called the Purge. Some see this as a way for the rich to keep the poor down, though it's not really too clear in the film exactly, just really kind of an excuse for some revolutionaries just to overthrow the government. In any case, Leo Barnes, played by Grillo, is a man on a mission to get revenge and use the Night of the Purge to get away with it. However, he sees some innocents being attacked and decides to go vigilante and be the hero, though he feels conflicted about it. This movie seems to want to be something really badly, but it kind of holds itself back. It wants to be this dystopian thriller, but its grittiness just kind of makes it blasé and ugly. Its characters are the same, being rather underdeveloped, even if the actors do an okay job. It's also held down by horror cliches that serve as the antagonists for the film, though I feel like they're kind of out of place sometimes. This isn't to say that there are some genuinely scary moments, and even morally effective moments as well. It's just that the picture lacks something. I would say it's something in regard to heart, perhaps, and fleshed out characters that prevent it from being completely effective, and I leave it with a C-.
Justin, how did The Purge Anarchy grab you?
My biggest problem from the original film stemmed simply from the fact that The Purge just doesn't know what it wants to be, and little is done to change that in the sequel. Going from the promotions, clearly there's meant to be some sort of political commentary in the concept, but this ultimately gets lost in a barrage of trying to be a horror / as Joe mentioned, dystopian action thriller that puts style before substance every time. That said, where I will give The Purge Anarchy credit is in its attempt to tell a more interesting story this time with some decent suspense. Granted, the acting is still mediocre at best and downright abysmal at worst, but watching the story of the characters unfold separately until they are forced to band together makes for at least tolerable summer entertainment. Unfortunately, this all leads to an incredibly safe and rather weak conclusion, clearly meant to leave a little crack open for a third movie, in a weak attempt to become the next annual horror film in the same vein as Saw or Paranormal Activity. I still can't completely recommend The Purge to our listeners in good confidence, but it's at least an improvement if only slightly over the original, and I give it a C+.
Well, I'm pretty much with you, Justin. I love the idea of The Purge so much, and the first movie was just predictable, disappointing, run-of-the-mill. But The Purge is a fascinating concept. And in Anarchy, I appreciate very much that they took it out of the single-family concept and showed what really goes on in the streets during the Purge and focused on a few different aspects than the first film did. This Purge is also much more of a thriller or even an action movie than the first one. I didn't really see it as much of a horror, except for, like Joe mentioned, those bizarre, cliched
things that just kind of stick out.
Yeah. That in itself may disappoint people looking for scares, but I feel like if the viewer goes into The Purge Anarchy with this mindset of maybe it isn't really a horror movie, they might be surprised. I don't know. The film is certainly far from great. Much like the first one, it's a lot of by-the-number stuff, and logic sort of takes a backseat to the story here. But again, I like the concept of The Purge. I like what it's trying to do. I thought Frank Grillo did a really good job.
He was good.
So he was good. I thought the action was pretty good. So, like Justin, I give The Purge Anarchy a C+, which is, for me, just a smidge up from the original. I feel like this had a much more open concept than the first one. Joe, you saw the first one, I assume?
Nope.
You did not? Okay.
Oh, okay.
Did you shy away from it because you didn't hear good things about it? It got pretty lousy word of mouth all around.
I mean, it's one of those things I was interested in it, but I just never was particularly interested enough to go see it, I guess.
Okay.
Just before we did the podcast, I caught the ending, and I once again, I thought the concept was pretty cool. But it, once again, is a very, very overused idea. I mean, I've seen it plenty of times in science fiction and even in video games. It's basically Manhunt. I don't know if either of you are familiar with that.
No, I saw the parallels there as well.
Don't get me wrong, it's something that I like, but the problem with it is I felt that it just wasn't handled properly. If you're going to do this political commentary, do it. But when they did that, it felt, like I said, forced and cheesy. I mean, it didn't even quite make sense. I mean, I understand what they're going for, the rich trying to keep the poor down, but since we know nothing about the world outside of the Purge, other than when the Purge is going on, it just seems like a bunch of rich people...
Yeah, that's an interesting point.
...purging like anybody else would, because there are bad rich people and bad people all over. I also agree with Justin. I really didn't like the ending. I thought that it was going somewhere really gritty, and it just kind of was incredibly safe. And I just felt like there were some really underdeveloped ideas. Admittedly, I can imagine that if the first one was a home invasion movie, that would be even more generic. But
Indeed.
But I don't know. I didn't think this was a good movie.
I think my biggest issue with it is just simply the fact that, Dan, I see where you're coming from with the idea that The Purge is kind of interesting on paper. The problem is they don't explain how we got to this point, why we got to this point, how it's being effective.
Well, they sort of explain why. You know, government conspiracy to get rid of basically all the poor people.
Which doesn't.
But they keep claiming, like, okay,
work.
yes.
I'm just saying, I mean, they do sort of explain the reasoning behind it.
And I mean, it's
sort of, but I mean, it still leaves a lot of unanswered questions.
And like I said, it's just a little hammy. Like, you see this guy, I mean, I just see it as an excuse to, like, okay, the government's corrupt anyway, and this, I mean, obviously they are, because the whole society's corrupt.
Right.
It's not just the government, it's everybody, because everybody accepts this passively. They think that it works. I mean, most people we see are kind of patriotic and engage in purging. I just think moralistically, if you're not going to go into the details, and it leaves a weaker story. Interesting themes, sure, but you know, let's put it this way: it definitely leaves a lot to be desired.
No, it's a good point.
I mean, as far as dystopian thrillers go, there are much better out there. I mean, Hunger Games is better.
Well, yeah, certainly. Would you agree, though, Joe, that it really isn't much of a horror movie?
That's kind of one of my issues with it, is that maybe because I wasn't as familiar with it, I knew that it wasn't going to be a straight horror movie, but those like gangsters that are following them are really creepy. Yeah. They're scary, and then you find out that they're not even really as big a deal as you suspect they're going to be. I found that to be kind of lame because they were the selling point of the trailer. Right. But even in the trailer, there's a contradiction there. Okay, it's a horror film, but it's also a gritty political commentary. It'd
be great if you gave us more to go off of with that instead of a couple random symbols.
You can tell somebody really wants to do this clever dystopian idea, making some kind of interesting commentary about class warfare, sure. But it's kind of hard to sell that in the horror genre.
Right.
I'm not saying that you can't have a movie that's disturbing that has complicated themes, but the way they did this film, basically making it an action thriller, you know, go into the government, go into these ideas, meet the rebels. Like, this was just...
The rebels basically just get a cameo.
They do. They come in and it just feels, once again, kind of forced and underdeveloped.
Like, if they had stopped it there, I probably would have been okay. It would have been a little abrupt, but I mean, I would have at least felt like we weren't getting carbon copy of the last movie.
And honestly, if they had ended it there, it would have been a good cliffhanger to lead into the next movie. Maybe we can actually plan to, you know, maybe take revenge. Even if we have to wait till the next Purge because it's the only safe time to do it.
Right.
Fine. Do it. But, you know, this is the beginning.
And here's the thing that, Dan, that kind of bugged me a little bit, but I kind of grew past it as it went on. I loathe when horror films or action movies just decide we're going to do a sequel but make it essentially a next generation story. There is almost no reference to the last movie whatsoever in this one.
I actually really liked that. I just feel like because the first film was just this one family and it was so generic, I really liked that they veered away from that and gave us completely separate people to care about, because the Purge affects everybody, not just that one family. I mean, that's the issue with a lot of these home invasion type movies. It's all about one family and one family only, but that's not what the Purge is. The Purge is about everybody.
And actually, that's another reason I had a problem with the film too, is that the characters were stupid.
Well, yes, you don't run errands with your, you know, wonky car
like 2 hours
before the Purge. I agree, that was really stupid.
And even the two girls whose father prepared them, you know, it's like, oh, let's keep the gun all the way there. You don't have a contingency plan? Your dad was, like, really against this.
Right.
You know, our friends to get this car. Oh, I'm going to lie to this guy about the car. You're going to lie to the vigilante that saved your life. The guy's not quite all there. I don't know, like, I'm sorry. Things like this.
Well, she was pretty desperate. I'll give her that one. But the other two, you're right.
The other two...
Idiotic.
I know their purpose, but if this is trying to be a smart movie, you can't do that dumb horror cliche stuff.
I mean, granted, I see where you're coming from. I definitely like the characters better this time. That's why, like I said, I grew past it. But I still would have loved to see like a reference to the security company Ethan Hawke's character was working for, or the guy that they had eventually saved that started the whole debacle. At least like something to say like, hey, we haven't completely forgot about where we started here.
I do agree, though. I liked Grillo's character. I thought he had a good arc.
Yeah, he was the strongest character for sure.
No, I liked him. He was a good character. The other ones were okay, but I didn't think any of them
were that standout.
They were more or less cookie cutter.
Well, that's going to wrap it up for The Purge Anarchy. Let's move now to the documentary Life Itself. Justin's going to tell us about that.
Over several decades, renowned film critic Roger Ebert has offered viewers his takes on film through his written reviews and with his old partner, Gene Siskel, from which the two thumbs up trademark was born. Now only able to communicate through emails and text-to-voice software, Ebert reflects on his past from his humble beginnings as a journalist to becoming a Pulitzer Prize-winning writer of film criticism with a lasting legacy. Ebert was quite possibly one of the most influential and groundbreaking film critics, and there's probably not a reviewer today that wasn't inspired by Ebert in some way. Guilty as charged. Though what audiences often forget about critics isn't necessarily about whether or not they're giving something thumbs up or thumbs down, or a letter grade if you're us, but rather offering up well-written articles that give movies that may not be seen by most their time in the spotlight. Ebert may not come off as the most lovable man, but he genuinely was about supporting filmmakers and living his life as vastly as the films he reviewed. Unfortunately, the problem comes from the handling of the documentary, which often bounces around from point to point with minimal direction, interspersing quotes from Ebert's book of the same name in to add personality. Although this is fine the first couple times, about half an hour of it feels as if the audience is watching an abridged recording of the book. Though despite this, the documentary does add a great deal of insights into things most probably didn't know about the early years of Ebert's life, and watching the clips with his co-host Siskel are equal parts funny, nostalgic, and if you're this critic, a little too close to home at times. Overall, Life itself is a delightful documentary celebrating the life of a man wanting to share his love of writing with the world, but only really coming to life in spurts, and I give it a B.
Well, I think it's safe to say that this show, and probably countless others, would not exist had Roger Ebert not existed. Siskel and Ebert was a weekly staple in my house from the late 80s into the Ebert and Roper years of the early 2000s. So I think there's probably bound to be a little bias leaking into all of our reviews, and really all reviews of this film in general, because it does hit so close to home. Steve James, the director, does a great but far from flawless job giving his friend Ebert the send-off that he wanted. And the viewer absolutely will get a deep appreciation for the work Ebert did, his love of movies, and his love of family, amidst a modest upbringing, alcoholism in his early years, and of course his long battle with cancer the last years of his life. But I think James does focus too much on that final portion of Ebert's life and not enough on the decades previous. We learn a lot about the man, but I would have really loved James to go deeper into Ebert's personal and professional life and less about his illness the last few years. And a lot of that does come from that time jumping that Justin mentioned. But even if you're not into film criticism specifically, as long as you're into human stories, it's absolutely a thumbs up. And I give it an A-. Joe, what do you think of Life itself?
Well, I will agree with you both. The biggest issue I had with it was the fact that it did seem a little bit scattershot. Like I didn't seem like it was completely organized. Sometimes it worked. It would when they'd go back to a certain point. Other times it did not. I mean, literally, it would go modeled from the book. Obviously, it's very closely modeled. They'd start off with chapter 2. Then jump to chapter 16, then 24.
Then 40.
Then 40, then back to 2.
And it always said on the screen like what chapter it was from, which I thought was...
That was distracting.
Sort of pointless.
I liked the fact when they interspersed like quotes and then like had something overlap. I thought that was kind of cool, like emphasizing the main point. But like the chapters, maybe for like a couple times, but they didn't have to do it constantly because it made it seem more disorganized than perhaps it was. But I do feel like there was a really good human story here. I think that we learned a lot about Ebert. I think we learned a lot about his life. I think we got a very good sense of the man he was, and I like the fact that they tried to add some personality over to it. And I thought that it really did a good job of showing a pretty good balance of all those different aspects of his life and how important he was into film criticism and how important it was to him, how passionate he was about it, and showing that he was a human being. He was imperfect and he had some struggles. I would disagree with you, Dan. I think the strongest aspect was actually that last portion.
Okay.
Showing his struggle, because I think we learned a lot about him through that. Seeing that even despite his cancer, despite his disability, in the last couple of years of his life, he was still reviewing films. He was still passionate, was still happy. I think if you detracted too much from that, I think something would have been lost. Because that was a side, I think, honestly, when I thought of Ebert, I never thought of him like that. I never saw him picture someone like that. Seeing him actually interact with his family.
I did.
I didn't.
I saw like an hour Oprah special when he was in that state.
I didn't.
Him and Chaz came on. So, okay. All right, well, that's fair.
So for me, I thought that was really impressive.
Okay.
So maybe, it was newer for me.
Maybe it was something I was a little more used to seeing then. That's a good point.
No, but I didn't know it was that bad. I knew that he had some issues with his thyroid, but I didn't know he basically lost a chunk of his throat.
Right.
And he's still going. And the fact that it showed he kind of did get a little weaker towards the end, but he still did so much. He still didn't give up. And I thought that was really awesome. That really hit me emotionally. And I would give it an A- as well.
Okay.
Actually.
Yeah, I thought it was certainly an eye-opening experience for anybody who is only familiar with the man through his reviews on the TV show.
Mm-hmm.
I think if he was going to focus so much on the last few years of Ebert's life, there's things he could have talked about.
Yeah.
Well, in that Oprah special that they did, they actually did fashion a voice box basically for him.
Mm-hmm.
From all of the years of the television and radio reviews. And so he was talking on the Oprah show like Ebert.
That's cool.
And not like this, Stephen Hawking type of voice box. So I thought that might have been interesting to go into.
Yeah, I definitely didn't know that.
See, I think that something like that would be interesting, but I don't think it necessarily needs to be a huge part of his life story.
I don't think it needs to be a huge part, but I mean, like, for somebody like me who saw this on Oprah, I don't know what actually happened to that. Like, why didn't he continue using that? It might have been interesting, because it is certainly part of his struggle.
Yeah.
And it's amazing that they were able to do this because he had, such an on-air presence through the years. It would have been interesting for them to just make note of the last film he ever reviewed, which they don't.
They did. They mentioned it briefly. Like, this was a film that I really loved, blah, blah,
But that
blah.
wasn't the last film he reviewed.
It wasn't?
Nope. To the Wonder was.
Oh, it was the last.
That's true.
And they do not mention that in the movie.
Oh.
And I think that might have been interesting, because they do pick different reviews from his entire career.
Like, why did they pick those certain
Bonnie
ones?
and Clyde.
Well,
and,
I
yeah,
think
it was, I don't know.
They were showing ones that I think he is best known for, because his Space Odyssey clips over them as well.
We're passionate about.
These are ones that he, like, really was best known for, like some of his best reviews.
Right.
And I don't mind that, like, focusing maybe a little more on that to reflect his life. I thought they did a decent enough job with that, with the snippets. The problem is it was disorganized.
Yeah,
like,
it
literally, like 2 or 3 minutes before he dies, this stuck out to me. Oh, how about your review of Blue Velvet? Like, the fact that you gave, like, David Lynch a hard time. And then, okay, interesting. And then he dies 2 minutes later. Like, what was the point of, like, bringing up that he had issues with that? Like, were these literally the questions you're asking right then? And then you ask, like, oh, yeah, what are your thoughts about, like, film in general?
As a filmmaker, like, why?
Which also kind of bugged me, but also kind of got me very torn up about my grade, because obviously he reaches a point where he can't meet with him so much anymore, so he decides to basically give the questions to him individually via email.
Right.
Which is fine.
And the first, like, bit of it turns out okay, and then they take longer and longer to go, so I feel like that's sort of where the excerpts kind of were trying to take the place of that, and it just sort of felt like a cop-out. Don't know about you two, but I won't speak for you guys on that.
When you say excerpts, you mean, like, excerpts of his reviews over the years?
No,
I like those.
excerpts from books.
Yeah, but the book excerpts were kind of throughout the movie.
They were okay.
That's fair.
So I don't think that was.
It just bugged me.
The reason for that.
Like, they had decent portions, like, how he wrote that film, and just like certain films that he felt strongly about than others, and like, but just that bugged me personally, because he doesn't hate David Lynch. I mean, I know he actually liked some of his other movies.
It was a bizarre choice to include that question
it was like,
in
so
the movie.
He had some issues with David Lynch. Like, it made it seem like he was desperate because he knew Ebert was dying, so he started, like, throwing out these questions like, what are your feelings about the history of film criticism right now and the film industry right now?
Yeah.
Don't you lead with a question like that?
Yeah.
Like, isn't that, like, your first one?
That's what I didn't
Interviewing-wise,
this is like...
I would rather, like, okay, like you said, Joe, if you wanted to see more about his final days and his condition and stuff in his final years...
Towards the end.
Cool. That's fine. Why are we including a story about Gene Siskel getting one over on him in the plane, and then the question about where do you like to eat in Chicago in this movie? It's
a little disorganized.
I would have preferred more time spent on anything else about Ebert's life than that.
The only counterpoint to that is, I believe what they were trying to do was show a lot about Ebert through small things. Because even with the spot at the lake, we see him.
Oh,
that quote with the Great Gatsby.
That part I like.
And that was related.
Because that was personal.
It was a leader.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
was probably one of the stronger bits of the finale.
Like, I mean, they were trying to do a lot with a little, because I think they knew there's so much they had to fit in. Like saying, okay, one of the nice little things about him, he likes these general diners. He likes that homey feel. We learn a lot about the guy through little things, that, like, almost personally. It's trying to get us to know him personally, because sometimes it is the little things that really show a lot about an individual. One thing I felt that was interesting, where actually coming back to a certain point worked, is when they focused a lot about, a huge chunk of it is, of course, his relationship with Siskel. And then later on, they come back to him dying and his reflection on his own death and how he
was a really good scene.
How much he realized Gene meant to him, and how it impacted his life. And I actually feel like that is probably the most interesting part of the story. I would have liked to learn even more about that.
Personally, my favorite bit about him was just simply the fact that he was doing all this cool stuff to help out these people who were completely wondering if at this point in time their films were ever going to be seen.
Right.
These indie guys, yeah.
That one anecdote about him traveling off to Cannes or Sundance on like the last day to being one of the first in line to actually support his movie.
8 a.m. on a Sunday morning.
That was nice.
That was cool.
That was awesome.
Yeah, I liked that. Well, and the filmmaker himself, James, is the director of Hoop Dreams, which was a huge Ebert, go Hoop Dreams. That was his #1 movie of the year. This little indie documentary that nobody saw, and, so that's how they formed a friendship.
I think our generation always views critics as these kind of like people with an axe to grind, always trying to go after these filmmakers, these studios, trying to take it down. And really, that's not what they're trying to do. They're just trying to get their viewpoints out there and really address, like I said in my reviews, some of these films that honestly we wouldn't know about.
I mean, that is why, especially in this day and age with on-demand and DVDs, why the three of us do talk about certain movies that get a pretty limited release. I mean, we've talked about a few this year alone that have played in under 100 theaters. Cold in July is one of them, and God's Pocket is one of them.
I also would have loved to have seen some of the reviewers that came after Siskel. I would have loved to see Roper.
Yeah, it's a shame they really didn't talk that much about Roper, who spent a good 6-7 years
with him,
working with him.
Yeah, working with Ebert on the show after Siskel died. So
I mean, it's no Siskel.
I would have liked that as well.
I mean, they had a pretty decent show.
Yeah,
I watched some of them.
All right, well, to wrap up our new release schedule this week is the home media moment, and that is Gambit. And Joe's going to tell us about that.
It's directed by Michael Hoffman, and it stars some great people. Colin Firth, Cameron Diaz, and Alan Rickman, one of the best. And is a remake of the 1966 film. Colin Firth is Harry Dean, a curator who wishes to get revenge on his bullying boss, played by Alan Rickman, by scheming to have him buy a fake Monet. He enlists the help of a woman named PJ, played by Cameron Diaz, to aid him in the ruse. Hijinks ensues as the two conflict on the best way to carry out the plan. The film has some clever jokes, and Firth and Rickman have some fun delivery in awkward British fashion. The plot itself is okay, though I've seen better caper films. I mean, it's no trance, that's for sure. Overall, it would be fine, except for one fact. Diaz plays such an annoying character. I was actually intrigued by the fact that she didn't speak in her first scenes. It seemed like a clever gag, but then she spoke with that atrocious accent. The character was annoying, an annoying stereotype, and she brought the movie down for me, but it would have originally would have been a B. Unfortunately, because of that really annoying cowgirl, it gets a B-.
All right. So it didn't bring it down too far for you.
But it was really annoying.
I will say that's probably the worst feature of the film is the accent.
For lack of a better word.
Everything about it, basically.
Well, listen, the bottom line for me with Gambit is I think it kind of falls under the category of guilty pleasure. It's not really all that good. But
it was entertaining.
Yeah, I mean, it was entertaining. It worked well enough for me. I thought the humor, while not fall down funny, was solid enough. I thought the interplay with Diaz, Firth, and Rickman was fun.
Actually, I liked the scenes where they were all together.
Yeah, the three of them together actually worked the best, I think. And like you mentioned, it was a remake of the 60s film, which stars Michael Caine and Shirley MacLaine.
Another Caine.
Another Caine. I'd never heard of it, but I'm sort of intrigued. Because, again, another singing credit scene like Alfie. But listen, I did enjoy it. I think Firth also doesn't get enough opportunities to showcase his comedic sensibilities.
He's good.
He's actually pretty funny, and he's funny in this as well. So I give Gambit a C+.
Okay.
Justin, what'd you think?
Each year, studios seem to release films with no expectation other than simply to make a cheap buck from audiences that don't know any better, that are commonly referred to as stock films. What is particularly insulting about this stock film is knowing that the source material for this film was a relatively well-received comedy from the 60s nominated for 3 Academy Awards. This piece of garbage, in dramatic contrast, will be lucky if it gets a Razzie. The story, while attempting to be a quirky heist film, is largely dry and boring, and the bulk of the jokes fall flat despite having a script written by the Coen brothers. Every character essentially feels like a caricature, and I cannot agree even more on Joe's point about Diaz's annoying attempt at a southern accent, and it makes an already short film feel tiresome. This is a pity given the amount of talent attached to this film, such as Colin Firth, who's generally pretty good, Stanley Tucci, and even Alan Rickman, despite being on a losing streak as of late. Overall, Gambit is a lazy, pitiful excuse for direct-to-DVD entertainment in the States. It was released in Great Britain in 2012 to equally negative reviews, and I give it an F. A small side note on the Coen Brothers thing. Apparently, they had written a script and then they had to ridiculously tone it down for PG-13, which I don't understand, but that's...
If it's direct-to-DVD, why does it even matter? But
exactly.
Okay.
But
sure.
Yeah. I mean, if it's the Coen Brothers' best writing, no, it's not. No. Obviously, and I've seen them do far. They've done far better stuff. But I really don't see an F here, Justin. I'll be completely honest. I've seen some bad movies. I'm not gonna lie. My B- might be generous. Even Dan C+ might be generous.
Possible.
It's not a great film. It's pretty mediocre. But I feel like it's one of those things. If you don't go into it with too extreme of a viewpoint, I mean, it's just simple, fun entertainment. You pop in the DVD. It's fine. I mean, I'll be honest. I don't feel like it's really cheap hash. I've seen far worse films.
I would definitely watch this again.
From direct to DVD. I don't feel like... I mean, there's some good performances. There's a decent plot. There's some okay editing. I mean,
other than Diaz's accent, Justin, I'm sorry, but Rickman was good here.
And Firth was good.
Firth was funny.
Yeah.
Stanley Tucci was good.
Yeah, Stanley Tucci was great.
I can't agree with any of that.
Let me ask you something, Dan. Do you remember Playing for Keeps?
Yeah, that movie was terrible, and I gave that an F.
This is basically the same thing in terms of content for me. The storyline was done and done again. It was boring. It was racist. It was unfunny.
Racist?
Japanese guys. Southern, ditzy, blonde.
It's a stereotype, sure.
Yeah, it's a stereotype.
But it was obviously a stereotype. I mean, it was annoying, yes, but it wasn't like they were trying to pass it off as something it wasn't. I didn't feel like the Japanese guys were stereotypes.
I didn't really.
Because they were rich and they wanted to bid on things?
They must be manipulating and backstabbing and, oh, yes.
It's called business, dude.
I don't know. I mean, that's the same thing as saying that the rich people in the Purge are stereotypes, which they are, but you gave that a C+. I think, I don't know. Every movie has some kind of stereotype, and I didn't really think so much about that.
I'll be honest with you,
bother me.
Justin, this is not my kind of movie. I mean, I'm not really going to rush to watch this one again.
Yeah.
But I actually don't think it was too long. I thought it went by pretty quickly.
I did too.
Oh my gosh. I was fighting to get through this movie.
Weren't you at least a little intrigued by the fact that Cameron Diaz didn't speak for like the first 20 minutes? I thought that was pretty cool. Like, what are they building up to? And then it was like, oh, well.
No, it's like,
annoying.
Okay, why isn't she talking? This is all right. And then she speaks, and what began as a C goes down to a D, and then slowly descends into F territory.
So it's basically you just didn't like Cameron Diaz in this.
No, like the first, I want to say 10 minutes or so, I was like, okay, this is basically generic heist movie fare, but I'm legitimately curious. And then just gets worse and worse and worse. Is it the worst thing I've seen this year? No. Is it still terrible at almost every level? Yes. The narrative is boring. The acting is awful. The general pace of the film, I couldn't stand.
I would say everything's passable in this film.
The stylistic elements or lack thereof are pitiful.
Yeah, I definitely don't agree with the pacing, and I don't agree with the acting. Other than Diaz's accent, Diaz herself was fine.
Yeah.
When the three of them are, together, I think it's fine.
You didn't like the gag where Colin Firth kept trying to be cool and he broke furniture and stuff, and Rickman just kept looking at him like, "What are you doing?" That was funny.
Cheap, pathetic slapstick.
It worked for me because I don't see Colin Firth ever do that. I'll admit that, but it's just so rare to see him do it, and it worked
and I
for
thought
me.
He was funny. I mean, obviously the humor didn't work at all for you, but completely. I don't know. I thought he was all right.
The narration was funny.
I don't have issues with him taking on comedy. If anything, I'm all for it because we know he can do drama. I'd love to see what else this guy can do.
Well, look, like I said, I mean, it's definitely a guilty pleasure movie, which for me means that it probably falls anywhere from a B to a D, depending on the person watching it.
I just don't think
I thought it was fine. I mean, I think the F is a bit harsh. But,
I thought it was okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I thought it was all right. Either way, let's move on to some better Cameron Diaz films that I think we can all agree might be better than Gambit. And that is the top 5 Cameron Diaz films. Joe, why don't you start with the top 5 Cameron Diaz?
All right. Now, I will admit I pretty much did this list based on movies I really like that she happens to be in. I think she does...
That's a good way to do it.
She does fine in all these movies, so I'm fine with that. All right, now number 5 is Very Bad Things. It's this really, classic Vegas dark comedy. A lot of great people in it. Jon Favreau, early role for him. Just this really dark, disturbing, crazy film that she's kind of the linchpin of, because she's basically the whole reason they decide to hide everything from her. And when she eventually finds out, she just completely flips out, and she just is kind of the terror all these guys are kind of trying to avoid throughout the whole film. So, haven't seen it. It's actually kind of an underrated, dark comedy. My number 4 is Being John Malkovich. This is a really bizarre film. She is bizarre in it, but I like the character she plays. It's kind of dark, twisted, kind of awkward like the whole film, but this is just a film that I think is unforgettable. It's really amazing, but it's kind of hard to explain. It's kind of something you have to watch to behold. And of course, you got some great ones. Cusack, obviously Malkovich.
Yep.
So really some great people, and it's excellent. I think you should definitely check it out.
I have not seen that movie. And, well, I've seen the first, 20 minutes of it, so I sort of know the gist, the concept. But I know we're going to be watching it soon enough for the Oscar A to Z, so
it's
I decided to wait on it. But
it's very odd. I mean, it's not like something I really enjoyed immediately, but it definitely requires rewatches. But it's a good film.
Okay.
Definitely liked it. Number 3 is Shrek. I was kind of torn between Shrek and Shrek 2, because Shrek 2 has always been my favorite. But Shrek, the first one, I think, is the one that really established her in this role. And she kind of is this individual, obviously, through the whole franchise. I think it's great voice work from her. It's probably one of her best roles. She has a lot of great chemistry with Myers and Lithgow and just everybody, Eddie Murphy in the film. But just a great cast of people having great fun. Probably one of the best kids' movies in the past, couple decades. It's a really good film. I like the first 2 Shrek films. And then there was everything else. All right. Though I never did see Puss in Boots. I've heard mixed things
was decent.
I've heard mixed things about that. Number 2 is Vanilla Sky. Justin's favorite, Tom Cruise, lead, and also one of Dan's favorites, Penelope Cruz.
Ugh, the worst of the worst.
But in the middle is Cameron Diaz, and she plays the psychopathic girlfriend. And really, it's a really complex film. I actually never saw the original film it was based on, but from what I've heard, it's a pretty good remake, and it's one of my favorite Tom Cruise films, and also one of my favorite Diaz films. Very strange, and of course, has one of the greatest supporting characters of all time, Kurt Russell.
Oh, alrighty. Nice.
As a psychiatrist. So, dreamy film. Definitely check it out. Absolutely.
Very cool. All right, Justin, how about your 5 through 2 for Cameron Diaz?
Number 5. I'm sorry, gentlemen, but I do love this movie. The Mask. I thought it was a really good early performance from her. I thought the storyline was quirky, loony, but also very, very entertaining. I thought she had good chemistry with Carrie, and I really thought that it showed promise for her comedic talent. Number 4. There's Something About Mary. Despite my personal gripes with this movie, I thought it was still a very, very funny performance from her, and a pretty funny story as a whole, and proof that nice guys do not, in fact, finish last. Number 3, much like you, Joe, Shrek. Probably one of the best family films of the last 15 years. Equal parts, great adventure story, and just general commentary on fairy tale tropes and how they create these bizarre situations that don't make much sense. I agree. Also hear great chemistry, and just a great universe. Unfortunately, got many issues with the 3rd and 4th installment. But I mean, probably one of the better movie twists and family films until being topped by the Lego Movie. And number 2, Joe, I think you'll appreciate this.
Will I?
Gangs of New York.
Oh.
A great switch from comedy to dramatic performance. I think it completely worked. She plays a really strong, complicated character, and she gets more and more interesting as the film goes on. And I really wish she would do more of this, because she's very talented at it. I never saw Vanilla Sky, but this really sold me that she can do drama.
I think you'd like her in Vanilla Sky.
Well, my top 5 Cameron Diaz films also starts out, like Justin, with The Mask. I don't know why you thought we would have a problem with that.
Because you guys gave me a hard time with it all the time.
Well, I give you a hard time about it because before you met me, you had never seen Dumb and Dumber, Ace Ventura. You'd never seen a whole host of classic Carrie movies, but you were super into The Mask. So I guess that's maybe. But no, it's a great movie.
Mask is fun.
And Diaz gives a really good performance in it. It's, I believe, her first full-on role. Before that, she was like a model.
Forgot she was in it, to be completely honest.
I did too, actually, before I looked at the filmography, because you don't really think of her. You think of him alone.
Thinking about it now, I did really like her in the movie.
Yeah, she did a good job. It was a good debut for her. My number 4 is My Best Friend's Wedding.
Oh, she's so annoying.
A great romantic comedy. She is very annoying, but she's supposed to be. That's the point of her character.
I knew someone was going to bring that up, but her character just annoyed me so much. She did good in it, but
It's a great Julia Roberts movie.
It is.
And the back and forth between the two of them is great. I thought it was very well done, very funny for that style of movie. My number 3 is Bad Teacher. We talked about this a little bit earlier with Sex Tape. I really, really love this movie. It was a hilarious film, and my biggest problems with it are that not all of it makes complete sense in the real world. That sort of bothers me sometimes with a comedy. There's no real consequences to certain people's actions, but you can't deny that the script is a hoot. Cameron Diaz is a little bit upstaged in any scene with Lucy Punch. Justin, that was your favorite parts of the movie.
Oh, yeah.
Lucy Punch.
She rocked it.
Yeah, she really did. She's hilarious. And my number 2 is There's Something About Mary. Really ushered in the new era of R-rated comedies. Because, of course, in the 70s and 80s, you had, like, The Animal House and Breakfast Club and stuff like that. But, this was before American Pie, before Meet the Parents, before a lot of those really popular R-rated comedies. This was kind of the first that brought it back. And, obviously the hair gel scene is an absolute classic. And Cameron Diaz really, really hits those couple of lines home, where she asks him if it's hair gel. So that is my number 2. Joe?
Good
All
choice.
right.
Thanks.
Yeah, that's a good choice. I always thought the part was kind of gross, though.
Well, it is.
It's supposed to be.
It's a gross out comedy.
I don't like gross out comedies.
Oh, okay.
To be completely
Well,
honest.
Depends on how it's used.
yeah, it depends on how it's used. I agree.
Generally, I don't like them.
Okay,
So,
that's fair. That's a fair statement.
But that is all I think about when I think about that movie. My number 1, hope you guys are ready for this. You were right, Justin. It is The Counselor. I mean, she just did such a great. She just did
It's such a good movie.
fantastic job.
You can't say a thing bad about it. Her performance.
It was
the way
so
she goes
much-
on that car, man.
So the way she just she merged with that car.
Yeah,
it was
it could have been called Sex Car
It was like Diaz
instead of Sex Tape.
like she counseled the car in ways that
basically-
didn't know could happen. No.
Yeah.
In all seriousness, though, my number 1 is Justin's number 2, and that's Gangs of New York. I mean, this is just a fantastic movie. It's one of my favorite Scorsese movies, if not my favorite. I mean, you've got, great people, Day-Lewis, one of his best performances. Great Leo DiCaprio doing what he does best. You've got Brendan Gleeson. You've got John C. Reilly. And you've got Cameron Diaz. And she does a really good job here. And I agree with you, Justin. She does have a very diverse role, very human, very believable. It's one of her best dramatic performances. And she does a great job with Leo and with Day-Lewis. So she holds her own. She needs to branch out a little more.
It's pretty impressive.
No, she is good.
And I know that you had wanted to bring this to an old classic at one point. We sort of deemed it a little too long for that particular week.
It'll happen, though.
But yeah, I really am looking forward to seeing it at some point. It's one of the few Leo movies I have yet to see.
It's really good. It's quite an epic.
Cool. Justin, what's your number 1?
Well, my number 1 has also been on your list, Joe, and that is Being John Malkovich. I'm a firm believer, as I mentioned in my Her review, that Jones does not offer the same experience twice, and this is really a textbook example of that. It's such an original, complicated plot. You almost wonder how somebody could come up with this and have it work as well as it does. I really like the fact that he made these characters interesting and just bizarre enough to be believable. And I really like that he made Cameron Diaz a surprisingly unattractive character and yet completely rock it.
Don't want to divert too much from this, Justin, but I think that Diaz did a good job. And you're right, they did make her look kind of unattractive. She's kind of this nutty, crazy-haired individual that you just don't take seriously, but she's so beaten down.
Well, my number 1 is the only movie that is on everybody's list, and that is the original Shrek.
Oh.
I'm very much in the same camp with you, Joe. Shrek 2 is my favorite, but because of the introduction of Puss in Boots, it isn't as focused a story on Fiona. So I did go with the first one, and obviously it's original because it's the first one. And she really does a great voice performance and does have really good chemistry with both Mike Myers and Eddie Murphy. All right, well, good list all around. Nobody put Gambit on it.
It didn't surprise me.
No, that
Tragic.
That wasn't quite a surprise. Well, up next we have our triple feature of older movies. First up is our new classic, and that is The Dark Knight Rises. Joe's going to tell us about that.
It's the third film in Nolan's Batman trilogy, directed by Christopher Nolan, obviously, and starring Christian Bale, Michael Caine, Morgan Freeman, Tom Hardy, Anne Hathaway, Gary Oldman, and Joseph Gordon-Levitt, among many others. The film takes place about 7 years after the last film, with Gotham having basically recovered from Harvey Dent's death. However, the return of the League of Shadows, led by the muscular Bane, played by Hardy, threatens to bring down the city once again. This brings Bruce Wayne, played by Bale, out of retirement one last time to stop Bane's plan to destroy Gotham. Like Nolan's repertoire, this film has some excellent cinematography and the use of minimalistic music to really capture the epic scale. Also, there is a great cast here, of course, and Nolan gets good performances from all of them. These are the great strengths that he will always possess. Then we come to the plot. While thematically, like many of the ideas in these films, they have often conflicted and even contradicted each other. This film was the worst in this area. It also has a much weaker script than its predecessors. Many plot holes abound, like the Gotham police being tricked into going underground, completely, and Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character knowing Bruce is Batman just by looking at him, while Gordon doesn't know it by the end. Also, for a franchise supposedly being super realistic, this one has some huge contrasts that make it very comic booky. Like Bruce showing up in this cut-off city in a few days with absolutely nothing, and of course Catwoman. Don't get me wrong, I feel that Batman's growth into the legend, more like the comics, is great, but greatly contradicts the established tone of the previous films. It also doesn't help that Bane is perhaps the goofiest villain since the franchise's darkest days. And even though I did enjoy the tongue-in-cheek dialogue, I need to understand more than a third of it. It takes away from the menace greatly. My biggest problem with this film, and to some extent the whole franchise as a whole, is that it sabotages the core fundamentals of what the character is about. Now, you'll notice in my review I actually left a lot of the comic book stuff out of this. But I will still argue, Batman gives up after his girlfriend dies, comes out of retirement, only to basically give up again. That is not Batman. Not in the slightest. One of the core attributes of his character is that he is obsessed, and he would never ever give up. An episode of the Justice League cartoon pointed this out, and it's correct. That's his superpower. They even quoted in the show. The movie has done some excellent elements, but overall I believe it has too many flaws to be elevated to great status, and I give it a B.
Upon viewing The Dark Knight Rises a second time for me, it's true that it doesn't quite hold the luster of the first watch. The flaws and the plot holes, some of which you mentioned, are much more visible. You know, sometimes when you go into a movie and you're so excited about it, you sort of, have the blinders on, and that's sort of, I think, what happened to me.
Believe it or not, I actually really liked it when I saw it the first time.
Okay.
But this is one of those things that I've talked about a lot with my friends. It kind of is sort of the running joke, like some of Nolan's other films. It's good the first time you see it. The more you think about it, it gets worse and worse as the years go on. And to be honest, giving it a B, I'm trying to be fair for everybody and general audiences. It's not what I would probably really give it.
For you, you'd probably give it lower.
It's not a bad movie, but it's got a lot of problems.
Well, for me, I do have to say, even with its flaws and plot holes, I found it to be an enjoyable experience still, and a great wrap-up to certainly one of the best superhero film series ever, in my opinion. One thing I really like about The Dark Knight, and I can definitely see people going either way on this, Joe, you might be among them, is that it's barely really a Batman movie. It's an action movie with a little bit of a superhero lean to it, but, I mean, Bruce Wayne doesn't become Batman till we counted, 46 minutes in.
Dan, he's only about Batman for 25 minutes in a 2.5-hour movie.
Yeah.
That's kind of a problem.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's, it's an action movie with a little bit of a superhero lean, not a superhero movie.
Which is a problem.
And that may be more of a problem for some than for others. I can definitely see it frustrating people. I don't know. I thought Wayne's struggle both physically and mentally was very engaging. Would I have liked to see him be Batman more? Yes. But, I don't know, we get so many superhero movies anymore that I sort of liked the anguish that Wayne himself went through as him and not as Batman. But I'm sure we can get into that. I thought Joseph Gordon-Levitt was a good addition to the franchise. Nolan's directing is incredible, and I didn't notice the tonal switch as much as you did.
It's pretty obvious.
I can see that it's a little more comic booky. I guess it just wasn't as much of a problem for me.
It's a bit more spectacle than I think the last two were. I mean, yes, there were crazy things going on, but there was always a sort of grounded component to it. This one, it's more like...
They were shooting directly at him and he was able to dodge it. Because he's Batman, and no other explanation. That's not just spectacle, that's ridiculous comic book logic.
I think audiences can also go back and forth on Hathaway's inclusion in the film.
I will point out that I do like her in the movie. I think she's a good Catwoman, but also she sticks out like a sore thumb.
Yeah, I don't know that she's necessary in the film, but I think she did a good job with it. So anyway, upon its original release, I put this movie in my top 20 for the year. I think that is a bit generous. I still give it an A-. Even with its flaws, I thought it was enjoyable.
All right. So did a lot of people.
But most of the people I have talked to felt that same way. Like I told one of my, as we were watching it, I was texting one of my friends, oh, hey, we're watching The Dark Knight Rises, because I knew he liked it. And he was like, yeah, the more I think about that movie, it's just not that good. So,
no, many people have said that to me
too. I guess that's sort of the general consensus. Justin, how'd you feel about it?
After the 2008 sequel blew audiences away, the question was posed in regards to how it could possibly be topped with a third film. The sad truth of the matter is it doesn't, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. While I applaud Nolan for choosing not to overly focus on the events of The Dark Knight, or just largely Heath Ledger as the Joker, there's still some lingering curiosity of how much did change because of Ledger's death, and what would the film have been like had he not passed on so soon. The film itself is still very entertaining and arguably tackles heavier themes than the others, such as looking at the reasons as to why society has become so corrupt, but it comes off as a bit of a rushed final product. This causes the central story to jump around from time to time, which makes some of the ideologies already posed in past installments contradicted or just flat out negated. However, when the film does come together, particularly during the third act twist, it comes extremely close to matching the intensity of the last two movies. I originally gave The Dark Knight Rises an A-, but this being the fourth time around for yours truly, the flaws do become gradually noticeable, and I bump my grade down one notch to a B+. It's just one of those films that you generally leave satisfied, and the more you think about it, the more frustrated you get with it, because you don't want to convince yourself that you just watched a movie that kind of was not up to par with the last two.
There were definitely a lot of issues with the movie, and I mean, I just feel like even within the terms of the franchise, some of those big ideas are contradicted. I think that's a bit of a problem, and I will admit that's probably has something to do with Ledger's death and changed scripts, but there were other ways you could have gotten around that.
Easily.
I mean, you obviously had a whole Two-Face storyline you could have easily expanded on.
Yeah, I'm not sure why they didn't go with that.
Lost opportunity, if there ever was one.
I mean, it would have made perfect sense, and you didn't necessarily need the Joker to do it. So, you
right.
know, I don't know. That's a whole other ball of wax in of itself, but I appreciate the fact that Nolan kind of wanted to do his own spin on this and kind of ended a certain way, but I didn't like the ending of this film. I can't say that I felt truly satisfied. I think the film was pretty entertaining overall, but I just don't think the ending worked. I mean, I think it just destroys the character on a fundamental level. I actually don't have a problem with the idea of how he was going to end it. There was just one thing that occurred at the end that I felt was a cop-out. If you wanted to have somebody take the reins, I'm not completely against the idea. Will they ever be Bruce Wayne's Batman? No. You have Batman Beyond. You have one of the Robins taking on the mantle to become him. But that's not the Batman. Can you take on the reins and live up to that legend? That's one of the main themes of the Nolan trilogy, that, you know, everyone can kind of be that hero, use the mask, sure. But nobody's really Batman. Batman is Bruce Wayne, that concept, that character. No one will be him. And that's the mythos of the character, because he is an unbelievable character.
So do you feel sort of like cheated?
If what had happened at the end had actually happened, and not the thing that happened with Alfred later on, I would have been more satisfied.
Okay.
Because, you know, I don't have a problem with Batman, you know, having that finality, but actually do it.
Let me ask you something as a comic book fan that we all know you are.
Okay.
Do you think, personally, that had they chose to do that, it would have riled up comic fans?
I'll be honest, when it comes to, like, hardcore fans of the comic books, and maybe even fans of these films, no matter how you would have ended it, nobody would have been completely happy.
I agree with that.
But if you want to have a stronger ending for the character, you do it. You follow through and say, hey, sacrifice, next generation, boom, let's move on. Let's not tease it and say, oh, not really. That just makes that character look weaker. I'm sorry. That really bothers me.
No, and I can see why, because it is a very Hollywoodized,
you know what I mean,
ending. Yes, I do.
It just seems very not Batman. Because don't get me wrong, I mean, you want to have Batman have the happy ending, but every version of the character,
right?
Relationships are second to him. It's the city. It's vengeance. It's the night. That's what he's about.
Yeah, I'm fine dropping this to a B+. I mean, because I can't refute anything you're saying. Everything you're saying rings true with me, even though it was an enjoyable movie.
You know enough about Batman to know what I'm saying.
No, you're absolutely right. And the Bane thing really did get on my nerves with the not understanding what he was saying.
And hey, to be honest, Bane is very much like he is in the comics, not the way his power works, but the way his personality is. It's fine. But I'm sorry, it was
you
silly.
gotta understand him.
I didn't understand half what he was saying.
So basically, if you've seen the movie once and enjoyed it, just leave it at that. Don't watch it a second time.
That's what I recommend.
Don't think about it.
No, I honestly think Dark Knight Rises is a good thing to cap it off. See it if you haven't seen the other ones, but then you just leave it.
But then, that seems to be the takeaway.
Don't watch it again.
All right, well, our old classic this week is a listener's choice, and that is from Indigo, and she suggested The Secret of Kells, and Justin's going to tell us about that.
All his life, Brendan, played by Evan McGuire, has lived behind the walls of Kells under the watchful eyes of Abbot Kellick, played by Brendan Gleeson. However, when Brother Aidan, played by Mick Lally, arrives with a book that can supposedly drive out the darkness with its light, Brendan is sent into the forest in which he meets a mysterious fairy named Ashlyn, played by Kristen Mooney, who helps him gather ink for the book before the barbarians and worshippers of the ominous Crom Cruach close in on Kells. It's hard to find a family film these days that dares not to pander primarily to kid audiences, but instead decides to tackle some mature issues while still providing something wholesome for all ages. This, I believe, is often more evident in foreign family films, and it's truly on display in The Secret of Kells. While the story is likely darker than most family films that you would see in mainstream Hollywood, Kells tells an enticing story with great characters while providing an important message about not living in fear of censorship and embracing one's creative side. That said, in the 75-minute running time, the film only makes use of the major characters and ultimately leaves everyone else off to the side. Alongside this, while the imagery is unbelievably detailed and stunning, and I cannot stress this enough, it can also be a little distracting at times. However, The Secret of Kells still serves as a shining example of family films acting as both entertainment and something intellectually stimulating, and I give it a B+.
Well, for me, The Secret of Kells begs the question, how important is the look of an animated film? When I first saw this movie years ago, I was just turned off by the style of animation. I call it Picasso animation because it has this bizarre approach, kind of like Picasso's Cubism period. Art, of course, is subjective, and I was never personally a fan of that style, so I kind of wrote Kells off for that. But since we were watching it for the show this week, I really wanted to look beyond my feelings on the animation itself and look at everything else. Now, to be fair, I think the style works very well when there's a fantasy or a dream sequence. And I can actually see why this movie has developed a bit of a cult following. Overall, though, I wasn't quite pulled enough into the story, and perhaps it is due to the short runtime that I didn't get fully engaged. Like Justin sort of mentioned, it seemed like they were trying to cram a lot in, and so some of the stories and the characters don't get enough time devoted to them. But I have to say, even with that and the animation style not doing it for me, it's hard not to see that this is fabulously directed by Tom Moore and Nora Toomey. Some of the most fantastic and creative animated shots I've ever seen are in this movie. So for all of that, I will give The Secret of Kells a B. Joe?
Yeah, I've seen this film before, and I really do like the mythology and the cultural aspect behind it. I really get a good feeling for the people that made this film. It really is beautiful. I mean, in terms of imagery, I think it's honestly one of the most beautiful animated films I've ever seen for 2D animation. It is fantastic. I do think that there is kind of a short runtime, and they do cram a lot of story in there so that some things aren't quite as well explained. I think some of it might be a little metaphorical. So I do agree that maybe for young children, it might not be necessarily the best. But overall, I think it is good, wholesome entertainment that does get you to think. It does have an enjoyable story and some honestly powerful moments. So I'm kind of on the fence here, but I'm going to give it about a B. I think it's good. I don't think it's fantastic. I do wish they had expanded on some more ideas. But overall, I do think it's a well-done film.
I really wish that they would have just devoted a little bit more time. Like, even the book itself, you don't get exactly the sense, and maybe it is metaphorical more than anything, but, you know, what is it about the book that is so magical? You know, what is the purpose for trying to get it, you know, and doing whatever it takes to get it?
I think you can pretty much infer that's sort of the beauty of the book itself.
That's kind of what I got, you know. I mean, and sort of envelops the history of the town.
And Justin and I were talking about a little bit. You could argue that taking place around the time it is medievally, that there's also just a record of history. And the fact that there's written word around this time would be very rare. It also could be a holy book, something really incredible.
I had thought about that as a possibility as well.
A printed Bible, the actual stories taken down. Of course, journeys to the outside world would be very important to monks. So there are a lot of reasons I could say it's beautiful. It's kind of preserving civilization in a way.
Okay.
And I mean, by the end of it, it's also touching on deeper themes that can be explored, obviously, because it's so late in the game. It's one of those things that you have to sort of like take back and look at individually. Do you think this film would go over the heads of most kid audiences?
I don't think it's for kids. Probably, certainly not 6 and under, maybe 8 and under. I think 8 and above, I think would be able to appreciate it. I don't know how the animation style would be for them.
I think the animation style is not exactly conducive to most kids today.
Yeah.
It's not exactly fast-flowing. It's kind of more static.
It's not something you're going to see on Cartoon Network, no.
No, I mean, well, I'm not saying that. Even, like, bigger budget animation films, like most Disney pictures or something, there's a lot of flowing animation. There's a lot going on. And it's not
vivid detail.
It's not
as well.
It's not as condensed.
Yeah, I think this is more about creative shots and that sort of thing.
I'm not saying that they couldn't appreciate it, but yeah, I definitely say small kids probably should avoid it. I don't know. I think it might bore them, to be honest.
Great films are all about getting you to talk about them.
Yeah.
And even sometimes with truly, truly terrible films.
It's true.
The worst films that you can possibly see in this world are the ones that you have nothing to say about, like Sex Tape.
Yeah, I agree with that statement. I think the worst thing a film can be is dead average because it's forgettable. Really.
Yeah, that's probably true.
Even in bad films, at least if you remember something about it, that's something.
Yeah.
So I feel like, yes, it is approachable for probably older audiences, kind of in the Tintin variety, I'd say.
Personally, I think it's more for adults. If you want to be completely honest.
And I would agree, but it's not one of those things I feel like parents should shy away from showing their kids, because I feel like there is a lot kids can really get from this. I really do admire the message of this film.
I think it would be well stated into family films. I think it would be good to have an adult there to kind of maybe add some insight or just kind of like guide younger kids through, and maybe vice versa. I think it's a film that definitely requires generational perspectives.
I mean, I think there are certain films lately, last, say, 3 or 4 years, that do sort of have deep-seated roots, like the How to Train Your Dragon series, or even Brave, that do sort of have that, maybe not as intense as in Kells, but have that sort of theme of, history and culture, and it's integrated into the story.
Yes.
So, I don't know, I think, to answer your question, Justin, probably kids 8 and above could appreciate this. Maybe not on the same exact level. I mean, this was nominated for an Academy Award, at the time.
Absolutely.
I don't know if they will appreciate as much as maybe the adults.
Probably not.
But I wouldn't say it's not for kids.
No.
But
I do think it's aimed at slightly older audiences.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
And I think 1010 was a good example. All right, well, let's move on. We have our Oscar A to Z film to wrap up the show, and this week that is American Graffiti. This is a 1973 film nominated for many things. Best Picture, Best Director for George Lucas, Original Screenplay, Candy Clark for Supporting Actress, and Editing. It didn't win any of them, unfortunately, but it did win the Best Picture Comedy at the Golden Globes that year. This is a coming-of-age film taking place over one night in 1962 in California, and focuses on teenage obsession with cars, romance, and music during the baby boom generation. It stars Richard Dreyfuss and Ron Howard in early roles as recent high school graduates and best friends. Cindy Williams is Howard's girlfriend, and Charles Martin Smith and Candy Clark, in her Oscar-nominated role, like I said, as a boy and girl who meet that night. Harrison Ford supports in an early role, and radio legend Wolfman Jack portrays himself both in person and in radio voiceovers throughout the film. This is George Lucas's second feature following THX 1138, which is referenced in the film. Setting aside for a second all the careers that were basically launched with this film, including no doubt getting Ron Howard his Happy Days gig the following year, Graffiti serves as probably one of the greatest time capsules in American cinema. The film is purely American in its tone and story, but but the themes of love and of one's future are universal. The music provides the perfect backdrop, and it's a film that really should be spoken in the same breath as The Breakfast Club and 16 Candles as near-perfect coming-of-age films about being on the verge of adulthood. More cohesive story might have been nice instead of the vignettes that we get, but I think Lucas's choice still works well, and I give American Graffiti an A. Joe?
I do have to say, you summed it up pretty much perfectly. I think
Thanks.
that this is basically George Lucas's swan song to his age in the 50s and 60s growing up.
Yeah.
I mean, really, we see a lot of Lucas here growing up. His love of music, his love of cars, his love of just growing up in the uncertainty of the time, the sense of fun, the sense of wonder. And it just shows what a diverse director he really was. I mean, he's really only done a couple films.
Right.
We see this is pre-Star Wars. We got to see some sci-fi with THX 1138, but also very different film from any of the other ones.
Mm-hmm.
And here we see something truly wholesome, a really good story. I do agree that I wish there had been a little more of a focus, because sometimes you get a little lost in the vignettes, so some things become a little distracting.
Yeah.
When you bounce between the storylines. But overall, it is a fairly unified piece in terms of the music, the themes, and there are some really great scenes and editing here. It's just a beautiful film, and there really is nothing particularly flawed about it. I have to equal your A.
And I think you're absolutely right. It really is sort of like a love letter to Lucas's own
Life.
youth. Yeah.
It's
And you know, when he was around that age, 17, 18.
It's really, in a lot of ways, it's kind of biographical for him, because if you look at all the characters in the film, they are all different representations of a different aspect of his young life. I don't know if you know much about Lucas,
Right.
but
I don't.
So
that's very interesting.
That is a lot about his youth and just his general feelings about how he grew up, apparently.
Huh.
From what I understand.
I can totally see that. Justin, what'd you think?
It's strange coming back to a movie like American Graffiti over 5 years after originally watching it. I found it enjoyable and the characters certainly likable, but the lack of much of a story kind of bugged me at the time. That said, on screening number 2, this changed significantly. The vignette-style narrative that the film embodies works well in simple, albeit pragmatic ways. Each character's task seems tangible, but gets more complicated and engrossing as the film progresses. The characters drive on the streets as if they own them, and it's remarkable how little has changed in the mindset of post-graduation high school seniors. I still would have loved more stakes than a mere drag race to wrap things up, but it serves its purpose, so I can't be too critical about that. After 2 viewings, I found American Graffiti to be a fun story about one last night at home before embarking on the road to adulthood, and I raised my original grade of a B+ up to an A.
Justin, you gave that a B+ the first time.
I was young and stupid.
Yeah, but you were probably about the age, if it was 5 years ago, you were the exact age of the people. That it didn't resonate with you like that?
I mean, I think it came out at a time where I was still kind of living that kind of angsty phase where, oh, I didn't want to believe I was them. I'm so much more different. And now I kind of look back on it and I'm like, oh my word. This is basically my mindset at the same time. And
I think it was everybody's.
Exactly, which I think is a really universal theme and one of the things I do appreciate about this movie.
I think one of the great things about it that makes it such a good coming-of-age tale is just how universal those ideas are and how it shows that even today, really, the same basic concepts are there. People still act and
it all still kind of applies.
The same goals, the same fears, the same basic interactions. It's kind of interesting how that just really remains unchanged in the process of human life. It's just something he really captures so well. And actually, it's the second time I ever saw this. First time I saw it, I was 13.
Oh, okay. So you were on the other side of it.
So I had a very different perspective. But
Yeah.
I did remember really liking it back then. So, I still
So
think
it
it was
spoke
good.
to you even then.
Yeah. No, I liked it back then. I thought it was a really entertaining movie.
Well, I think that's one of the great strengths of The Breakfast Club. And it's sort of a shame that American Graffiti hasn't sort of passed along the generations like that film has.
Well, it's a good film, and everybody knows it's a good film. People mention it in passing. It does have a good reputation, but it doesn't have that same cult status because, like everything else in his career, Star Wars totally overshadows it.
That's fair.
I can see that. You're right, because really for John Hughes, Ferris Bueller and Breakfast Club are the pinnacle.
While George Lucas was working through his career, he experimented a bit in science fiction, a little more artsy, kind of made this very solid film, kind of was just, I don't want to say safe, but, something that's easily accessible for most people.
I honestly wish he had done more like this instead of immediately jumping into sci-fi.
He basically took on Star Wars.
And that was that.
Star Wars ate that. He did produce some things, but There's a whole long story
No, you're right on
about
that.
this, and it basically ate his career, and it overshadowed everything else, and it's
The rest
kind
is
of
history.
a source of bitterness for him, which I think has fed into his other works afterwards, and I've actually read interviews about it, and he wishes he had done more films like it too, and I would say
I can see why.
nothing was ever stopping you.
Right.
So-
right. Yeah, it was your life.
You know, it's like the thing, and I don't want to go too off on this because I know the show's ending, but it's just one of those things we see. I know you never saw THX, but you've seen the Star Wars films to some extent. You know them. You see THX, and between THX, American Graffiti, and Star Wars, you'll see three completely different types of films. And you'll see how diverse a director he was. We know he's a great director. He has a lot of potential. You know,
And he didn't tap into it.
you know, he said, you know, people. I think in one interview he said, you know, after I did Star Wars, that's all people wanted to see from me. If you had done any movie that just said directed by George Lucas, people would have seen it because they said, the guy that did Star Wars. And
Right.
It's stupid
Well,
logic.
Look at, I mean, one of his peers, Steven Spielberg.
His
look
best
at how
friend.
diverse, his good friend, best friend, and his equal, really, in terms of successful directing at the time.
Yeah.
I mean, he was obviously huge, you know, first with Jaws and some other things, and then with E.T. was just like, oh my god, this is the kid's director, this and that.
But did he just do AT stories?
Right, but
No.
look at how diverse over the next 20, 30
Still.
years, and still, Lincoln and Tintin and everything else.
What's stopping Lucas from doing things like
Yeah,
that?
Lucas is still alive. He can still direct. You know, if he wants to do more movies like this, go for it.
Which I have to pose the question, since I also know that you have a big fandom with this as well.
Yeah.
Obviously, the prequels did not resonate as well with everyone as the first three movies did.
I'd argue divisive, actually. But yeah, you're among fans. you're right.
Divisive. Obviously, Star Wars franchise is now out of his hands. Do you think that he could make a comeback, do more movies like this, and people would be accepting of it?
Nowadays, I mean, I would be open to it because I'm a forgiving person. People really hate him.
People are really mad at him about
Star
the
Wars.
changes.
You know,
Yeah.
like he basically tried to sabotage his own stuff, and I think there's a complicated sort of self-hate for his fans, which I don't understand because Star Wars is one of the most beloved franchise ever. I really don't get it, but if he could do it again, I'd say he could definitely make more films. But would people?
I agree, though. I think people really have held a grudge for a decade now,
At
or
least.
more. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess 15 years now, about
the prequels
the prequels
and everything else,
and the re-releasing of, you know, the originals, and
they'll blame him for other things now that aren't even
Right.
his fault, like, you know, the changing of the new movie, taking out of context for expanded universe stuff, or the cartoon that's going on. He doesn't have anything
it's
to do
like,
with that.
right, he sold
It's like,
all that.
like they're blaming him for things he's not even doing
Right.
anymore.
So I agree. I think it would be an uphill battle for him.
But you know, if you wanted to,
But
go
not
for it.
not the hardest struggle a filmmaker in Hollywood's had to
Let's
do.
What
let-
you do is do an indie movie. Mm-hmm. You know, that
knock it out of the park.
goes to the art house crowds, knock it out of the park, then the buzz starts spreading. Maybe he gets a nomination at the awards, you know, whatever, and it brings his name back up in a different context.
You know, I just say that's possible. You know, I'd say it's definitely fine to do.
All right, well, that is going to do it for the show this week. Joe, what do you have coming up on the Merlin channel?
Well, I did do an anime character analysis recently from Fullmetal Alchemist, and we are still planning on doing a controversial film soon, and I believe we're starting with Aladdin.
Oh, very nice. That is controversial.
It is.
Yes.
Yes, it is.
But not as controversial as some, right, Justin?
Oh, we'll be heading into deeper stuff later
You
on.
guys will be hitting them all, I'm sure. All right, well, if you are not a subscriber yet to this channel, you can certainly go ahead and do that. We would love to hear from you. And the Facebook group up and running, Film Fanatics with an exclamation point. We post our 5-word reviews there weekly. And the Twitter feed, @Film Fanatics Pod. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you back here next week. Bye!